When the Laird's bride got sick, she left, yet a humble servant altered his fate. Waves of wind swept through the valleys, carrying the bitter scent of salt and stone. In the heart of this storm-beaten land stood Castle Dunraith, home to Laird Eden, a man known across the Highlands for his fierce pride, unwavering will, and a lineage that had long been touched by misfortune. Every bride who had married into his house carried a shadow, and every union had ended in sorrow. Yet when Lady Aloin arrived at Dunraith, hope lingered in whispers among the servants. She was gentle, pale as moonlight, with hair like spun silver that fell around her shoulders. Even the eldest maids dared to hope that she might break the curse that clung to the Laird's line. But no one could have predicted the illness that would take her from them. Not illness in the ordinary sense, but a sickness of spirit that no healer could touch. At first it was subtle. Eloin's laughter grew quiet, and her eyes, once bright, seemed veiled with a distant shadow. She would wander the halls alone, fingers tracing the cold stone walls as if searching for a lost memory. No potion, no prayer, no charm seemed to lighten the darkness inside her. Eden, watching from the great hall with its towering windows and roaring hearth, felt a weight pressing on his chest that he had not known before. He was a man used to control, to strength, to command, but Eloin's suffering left him powerless. He sent for the wisest healers from across the Highlands, for priests and seers who spoke in riddles and flames. They brought herbs, chants, and silver charms, yet nothing healed her. At night, when the storm winds shook the castle, he would find her in the chapel, kneeling alone before a statue of some forgotten saint. Her whispering prayers were soft, almost melodic, yet tinged with sorrow. He approached carefully, not knowing if he could comfort her or if his presence would deepen her despair. "Why do you not rest?" he asked one evening, his voice low and steady, though his heart shook. Eloin lifted her head, eyes full of shadows. "I cannot rest here, not while I carry something I do not understand," she said. Her voice trembled, but she did not meet his gaze. "I am a burden, Eden. I feel it in my bones, and I see it in the way the castle, the very walls seem to whisper." He stepped closer, reaching for her hand, but she flinched, a subtle, fragile recoil that shattered him. "Do you not trust me?" he demanded, though his words felt hollow even to himself. "I do," she whispered, "but there are things you cannot fight, things older than your line, older than this castle, and I cannot let them take you too." Days passed, and Eloin grew weaker. Her illness or curse, as some whispered, consumed her with quiet inevitability. One night, under a sky thick with stars and wind, she slipped away from the castle. She left a letter in the small garden where wild herbs grew, a note that spoke of sorrow and love, of duty and sacrifice. She did not say goodbye, for she could not bear to stain his memory with her despair. When Eden discovered her absence, rage and grief twisted inside him like fire and ice. The letter, trembling in his hands, was as if it had been written by the very wind that carried her away. "I leave so you may live," it read, simple words yet heavy with meaning. The Laird clenched his fists. He had lost her, yet a part of him understood the cruel love behind her act. The castle fell silent. Servants whispered in shadowed corners, afraid to speak too loudly for fear of drawing the restless spirits that roamed the halls. And yet, among the quiet fear, one pair of eyes watched with something different than sorrow or fear. Mara was a humble servant, young but wise beyond her years. She had grown up in the kitchens and corridors of Dunraith, learning the secrets of herbs, old chants, and hidden corners where whispers of magic lingered. When she heard of Eloin's departure, she did not mourn in the ordinary sense. She felt a spark, a responsibility, though she could not name it. By day, Mara went about her tasks, cleaning the hearths, tending the gardens, and moving quietly through the halls. By night she moved with purpose, leaving small charms in corners, mixing herbs in quiet rituals meant to ward the castle against grief and shadow. Sometimes she would leave a small note, a piece of advice or encouragement for the Laird to find. And though he did not know her name at first, Eden began noticing these subtle gifts. It began with a bundle of lavender and thyme on his bedside table with a note in neat handwriting. "Do not let grief cloud the strength you hold. The castle needs you, and so do you." At first he was suspicious. Who dared enter his private chambers? Yet the care, the precision, and the undeniable wisdom in the note forced him to pause. Night after night, Mara's guidance became a quiet presence in his life. He felt her courage, a light against the darkness of his mourning. Eden, proud and unyielding, found himself drawn to her, not as a laird to a servant, but as one lost soul to another who carried strength quietly without claiming it. He noticed how she moved through the hallways, confident yet unassuming, how she could speak a few gentle words, and make the castle feel less like a tomb. Mara, for her part, did not seek recognition or praise. Her actions were small, deliberate, and careful, but she could not hide the truth from herself. She was drawn to the Laird, not merely to his power or his title, but to the man who had lost so much yet still carried the weight of his ancestors with dignity and pain. One evening, when the wind howled against the castle walls and lightning cracked across the darkened sky, Eden found Mara in the herb garden. She was kneeling, her fingers busy with roots and leaves, her eyes reflecting the storm above. "You've been helping me," he said quietly, standing a step away. His voice carried no accusation, only recognition. Mara looked up, startled. Her hands froze mid-motion. I only wish to protect the castle and you, my lord," she said softly. Her words were careful, measured, but there was a tremor in her voice that betrayed the depth of her care. "You've done more than protect me," he replied, stepping closer. "You've reminded me of life, of hope, in a place that seemed full only of loss." Her heart thumped in her chest. She bowed her head, unsure if she had the right to feel what she did. "I do what I can," she whispered. Eden knelt beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. "Do you know what it feels like," he said, voice low, "to lose someone you cannot save?" Mara nodded, though she did not speak. She understood grief, though not in the exact way he did. She understood fear, longing, and the fragile nature of life within these cursed walls. The night deepened and the storm raged around them, yet for the first time in months, the castle felt alive with a quiet pulse. Neither spoke of Aloan, yet both knew the absence of the bride hung between them, a shadow that neither could ignore. Days turned into weeks. Mara continued her work, guiding Eden with subtle wisdom, tending the estate and keeping the spirits of the castle at bay. He found himself relying on her, seeking her counsel, even if he could not admit it aloud. A bond grew between them, delicate yet unbreakable, forged in shared silence, mutual respect, and unspoken understanding. But the past had not fully released its hold. One evening, as Eden wandered the corridors, he found a small object tucked into the folds of Mara's apron, a delicate pendant, engraved with the initials EL. His heart stilled. "Aloan, where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and longing. Mara's eyes dropped. I found it where she had left it, my lord," she said softly. "I only kept it safe as one might a fragile bird. I thought, perhaps it should be returned to you when the time was right." Eden felt a swirl of emotions, grief, guilt, confusion, and something else, something unfamiliar yet undeniable. The woman who had left him, the bride who had vanished, was still present in some way. Yet here was Mara, a quiet, steadfast presence who had begun to change the shape of his heart. He clenched his jaw, struggling to reconcile the past and the present. "Why do I feel as if the castle has not been empty, even though she is gone?" he muttered. Mara met his gaze unwavering. "Because hope lives, my lord, even in shadow, and sometimes it comes in forms we do not expect." Thunder rolled over the hills, echoing the storm within Eden. The pendant burned cold in his palm, a reminder of loss. Yet Mara's presence was warm, steady, a light in the darkness. And for the first time since Aloan left, he allowed himself to feel, not just grief, but the faint stirrings of something new, something fragile, something he dared not name. The wind whistled through the halls of Castle Dunraith, carrying with it the scent of the sea, the rain, and the unspoken promise of change. Eden turned back toward the hearth, the pendant clenched in his fist, Mara following silently, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The castle, cursed though it might be, seemed to breathe with them, alive and waiting for the next chapter of its story. And in the quiet shadow of the storm, both Laird and servant felt it, the beginning of a bond that might yet alter the fate of Dunraith, and perhaps even the hearts of those who had long thought themselves lost. Cliffhanger, that night as Eden stared into the dying embers of the fire, a sudden chill swept through the hall. From the shadows, a faint whisper of Aloan's voice echoed, carried on the wind. "Be careful, Eden, not all is as it seems." A shiver ran down his spine, for he realized that her departure had not ended the story. Something unseen and ancient was still stirring within the castle, and the humble servant who had altered his life might soon face trials neither of them could yet imagine. The morning after the storm, Castle Dunraith felt unusually silent. The halls, usually echoing with the sounds of servants and the crackle of the hearth, seemed empty as though the castle itself was holding its breath. Laird Eden walked through the corridors with a heavy heart, the pendant still clutched in his hand, a reminder of the bride who had left him and the invisible chains of the past that held him fast. Mara followed at a careful distance, her hands lightly brushing the cold stone walls. She had not spoken much since the night of the whispered warning. The castle, she knew, had secrets, and some of them were dangerous. Some of them were older than Eden's ancestors, older than the very walls that surrounded them. It was in the herb garden that day that Mara finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "My lord, if you wish to save what remains of your family's house, you must understand the curse that binds it." Eden stopped, turning toward her. His eyes, dark and stormy, searched her face. "You speak as though you know the ways of our ancestors," he said. "And yet you are only a servant." Mara met his gaze steadily. "The blood that courses through your veins may be noble, my lord, but the knowledge of the land, of its old magic, it does not follow bloodlines. It follows those who seek it and those who respect it." Eden studied her. There was no arrogance in her words, only certainty. And slowly he began to understand that this humble servant, small in station but vast in knowledge, might hold the key to lifting the shadow that had haunted Dunraith for generations. Over the next days, Mara taught him what she knew. She spoke of the spirits tied to the lairdship, of old pacts made long ago, and of the danger of angering them. She guided him through rituals meant to protect the living and honor the dead, showing him how to call on the old charms and the whispers of the wind for guidance. At first, Eden struggled. He was a man of action, not of patience. The rituals required care, focus, and humility, qualities that came slowly to him. Yet with each passing day, he grew more adept, more attuned to the subtle forces that danced through the castle. Mara's presence was always near, steady and calming, yet her eyes sometimes betrayed a worry she did not speak aloud. "You must be careful," she warned one evening, as they prepared a small circle of herbs and stones in the old chapel. "The spirits are not idle. They test those who would challenge them. They will use your fears against you." Eden clenched his jaw, determination hardening his features. "Let them come," he said. "I will not fail again." And yet, as the night deepened and the wind howled through the cracks of the old stone walls, he felt the first tremors of doubt. Shadows seemed to move where no light reached, and whispers brushed the edges of his consciousness, like memories half forgotten. Mara, noticing his tension, reached for his hand, light and firm. "You are not alone," she said softly. "Do not let the weight of your ancestors chain your heart." Her touch sent a quiet warmth through him, a reminder of life beyond grief. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt a pang of emotion he had tried to bury, the beginnings of trust, admiration, and something deeper, something he did not yet dare to name. But the past would not stay buried. One night, as the moon hung low and red over the castle, Eden awoke to a cold wind sweeping through his chambers. At first he thought it was the storm returning, but then he heard a voice, a soft, distant, unmistakable voice. Eden, he froze. His heart hammered in his chest. He knew that voice. It was Aloan, not her flesh and blood presence, but her spirit, bound by the illness and curse that had driven her away. He rose, following the sound through the hallways. Shadows seemed to twist around him, the whispers of the castle growing louder. He found himself in the garden where Mara had taught him the old ways, and there, among the silvered leaves of the herbs, he saw her, pale, luminous, her figure flickering like candlelight in the wind. "Eloan," he breathed, reaching toward her, but she did not step closer. Her eyes were sorrowful, filled with longing and warning. "You must not linger here," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The curse is stronger than you know. There are those within the walls who would see it spread. Trust, only the one who stands with you now." Eden's gaze darted to Mara, who had silently stepped from the shadows. Her hand rested on the pendant he still carried, steady and calm. Mara's presence was no longer small or invisible. She was strength and guidance, a light in the darkness. Aloan's spirit began to fade, leaving only a chill in the air and the faint scent of her hair like moonlit silver. "Be careful," she whispered, her words carried off by the wind. "Not all is as it seems." The following days were filled with preparation. Mara guided Eden through rituals more intricate than any before. They built protective wards around the castle, sprinkled herbs along windowsills, and carved symbols into stone in secret chambers. Each night they lit candles and whispered incantations, calling on the old spirits for guidance and protection. And yet, with every step they took, the presence of the past pressed closer. Shadows moved where no one should have been. Strange figures flickered in the corners of their vision. The servants whispered that the castle was restless, that it had grown aware of their work. One evening, as they worked late in the chapel, Mara paused, her fingers trembling slightly as she held a small crystal over the ritual circle. "The spirits are near," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. "Something watches us, waiting for a mistake." Eden nodded, understanding. "We cannot fail," he said, his voice low but firm. "If the curse is stronger than before, then we must be stronger." They worked side by side, preparing charms and wards that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. Mara showed him how to focus his mind, to place intention into each motion, each word. And as they worked, the bond between them grew. It was no longer just teacher and pupil. It was trust, admiration, and a quiet understanding that both felt but neither yet spoke aloud. The first real test came when a shadow crossed the great hall. Eden had been walking alone, checking the wards placed along the walls, when a sudden chill froze him in place. The candle he carried flickered violently. A whisper echoed from the far end of the hall, a voice filled with malice and longing. Eden's heart raced. "Show yourself," he demanded, though he did not know if he wanted the answer. From the darkness a figure emerged, not fully formed but a flickering image of Aloan. She was pale, eyes wide with fear, yet twisted by the shadow of the curse. Eden's breath caught in his throat. "Aloan!" The apparition's lips moved, forming words that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "You cannot save her without sacrifice, without risk. Do not trust all who guide you." The figure vanished, leaving only the echo of the warning. Eden's fists clenched. The shadow of the past was alive, and it would not yield easily. Mara appeared at his side, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you hurt?" she asked, though her eyes betrayed concern beyond physical danger. "No," he said, voice tight with frustration. "But the curse, it is stronger than I feared." Mara nodded. "Then we must be stronger together. You must trust me." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Eden, proud and fierce, realized that he could not face this alone. The castle had tested him, the spirits had warned him, and now the only path forward required unity, trust, and courage. In the days that followed, they worked even harder. Mara taught him the subtle language of the old magic, how to listen to the wind, how to read the shadows, how to call on the spirits for guidance without angering them. Eden learned quickly, not only because he was strong and disciplined, but because he trusted Mara in a way he had trusted no one else since Eloin left. Yet, the past continued to reach for them. Letters left by Eloin began appearing in strange places, folded into Mara's herbs, tucked behind the stones of the hearth, written in her careful hand but carrying warnings Eden could barely understand. "You must not be swayed," Mara said one evening, holding a candle high as the wind rattled the windows. "Her spirit, though it loved you, is bound by sorrow. It seeks to guide you, yes, but it also seeks to test your heart." Eden's gaze fell on the letter she held. His fingers itched to read it, to know Eloin's thoughts. And yet, he realized the truth in Mara's words. He could honor Eloin's memory, but he could not allow her absence to dictate his choices. Not when the present required courage, trust, and unity. The nights grew longer and the whispers stronger. Shadows moved closer, and the air seemed thick with anticipation. Eden and Mara, side by side, faced each test together, their bond growing with each ritual, each ward, each careful action. And then, one night, as the moon cast a blood-red glow over the estate, something unexpected happened. The veil between worlds thinned, and a figure appeared in the garden, not threatening but undeniably real. Eloin's spirit, luminous and sorrowful, stepped into the moonlight, her gaze fixed on Eden. "You must choose," she whispered, her voice both loving and distant. "Do not cling to the past, or it will consume you. The one who stands with you now, she carries your hope." Eden's heart ached. The woman he had loved, lost, and mourned was before him, yet he could feel the truth in her words. He looked at Mara, standing quietly, steadfast and unwavering. And for the first time, he understood that love could take many forms, and that courage could come from the most unexpected places. The spirit faded, leaving behind a quiet stillness. The wind carried a sense of both warning and blessing. Eden and Mara stood together, hand in hand, facing the unknown, ready to confront the darkness that lingered in the castle. The curse had not yet been broken. Shadows still lurked. But for the first time, the Laird and the humble servant who had altered his fate felt something stronger than fear: hope. Cliffhanger. As dawn approached, a cold wind swept through the castle, carrying a whisper that was neither Eloin's nor Mara's, but something older and darker. The bloodline's debt is not yet paid, the trial is only beginning. A shiver ran down Eden's spine. The real test, he realized, had not yet come, and he would need Mara by his side more than ever. The dawn broke over Castle Dunwraith like fire spilling across the highlands. The blood-red sky faded to soft pink and gold, but the air remained heavy with tension, as if the land itself held its breath. The castle, ancient and silent for centuries, now seemed to pulse with life, or perhaps with warning. Eden stood at the top of the main tower, the wind whipping his dark hair across his face. The pendant, the last remnant of Eloin, hung around his neck, a reminder of what had been lost and what could still be honored. Mara approached quietly, her steps measured, her eyes reflecting both determination and concern. "The spirits grow restless," she said softly, joining him at the edge of the tower. "The veil is thinner than it has ever been. Whatever comes, it will test every ounce of our strength." Eden nodded. "I know," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "I have lost too much to fail now. If the castle, my line, or the people within it are threatened, I will not stand idle." Mara placed a hand on his arm, warm against the chill of the morning. "You will not stand idle," she said. "Not alone and not without hope. Together we can face what comes." The sun rose fully, and with it, shadows began to move in unnatural ways. Figures twisted along the walls, whispering in voices that seemed to come from the stones themselves. Eden and Mara exchanged a glance. The trial was beginning. The hidden traitor it began with whispers among the servants, subtle and cautious. Something within the castle sought to undermine their work. Eden, Mara, and a few loyal attendants traced the disturbance to the old library, where books older than the castle itself were kept. There they found a figure cloaked in darkness, hands moving over a scroll as if drawing power from the ancient ink. The figure turned at their approach, revealing not a stranger but Sir Callum, a trusted advisor to the Laird. His face was pale, eyes hard, lips twisted in defiance. "I cannot allow you to undo what has been set in motion," Callum said, his voice cold and deliberate. "The curse is necessary for the line to survive. You do not understand the forces you meddle with." Eden stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of his sword, though his eyes stayed on Mara, seeking her guidance. She had taught him patience, focus, and trust. He knew now that brute force alone would not prevail. "You are wrong," Mara said, her voice ringing clear and steady. "The curse is a chain, and chains can be broken, but only if the living have courage and the wisdom to act together." Callum laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Wisdom, courage, mere words. You underestimate the power of what lurks within these walls." As he spoke, shadows rose from the floor, twisting into shapes that mirrored the faces of past brides and lairds, distorted and angry. The spirits of the castle had awakened, drawn by the challenge and the unrest in Callum's heart. Facing the curse, Eden and Mara stood together in the center of the library. Mara drew a circle with salt and herbs, chanting softly as Eden repeated her words. Their voices merged, low and melodic, filling the room with power older than the stones themselves. The shadows surged, lashing out at them with whispers that clawed at their hearts. Images of Eloan's sorrow, the pain of past generations, and the fear of failure all pressed against Eden's mind. He gritted his teeth, focusing on Mara's presence beside him. She was the anchor, the steady flame in the storm of his doubts. "Do not let them scare you," she said. "Face them, acknowledge them, then let them go. That is the way to break the chain." Eden nodded, drawing a deep breath. He thought of Eloan, not as a ghost to haunt him, but as a memory to honor. He thought of Mara, not as a servant, but as an equal, his partner in courage and strength. Together, they chanted louder, their voices weaving through the library, echoing against the ancient walls. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the power of unity and purpose forced them back. Callum, realizing his control slipping, tried to intervene, but the spirits, once bound to the castle's suffering, turned on him, dragging him into the shadows that had once been his allies. When the echoes finally faded, the library was still. The candles burned steadily, the circle of herbs and salt glowing faintly with the light of the old magic. Callum was gone, vanished into the dark void of the spirits he had tried to command. The spirit of Eloan. The air shifted, soft and quiet, and Eden felt a familiar warmth. He turned to see a figure appear in the doorway, the spirit of Eloan, radiant and calm. "You have done what I could not," she said, her voice full of both sorrow and peace. "You faced the darkness, the past, in your own heart." Eden stepped forward, bowing his head in respect. "I could not have done it without her," he said, glancing at Mara. You saved us both." Eloan smiled, faint and luminous. "Mara has always been strong. You have learned courage and trust, Eden. Now you have a choice. Live in grief or embrace life and the love that stands before you." Her form began to fade, carried away by the morning light, leaving only the memory of her eyes, soft, sad, and yet full of blessing. Eden felt the weight of sorrow lift slightly. He had honored her memory. He had saved the castle. Eden and Mara, the castle felt alive in a way it had not for decades. Sunlight streamed through the windows, revealing tapestries of battles and feasts long past, now glowing as if proud of the present. Mara and Eden stood together in the great hall, their hands brushing briefly, sharing a quiet understanding. "You did it," Mara said softly. "The curse, it's broken." Eden shook his head. "We did it together. I would not have survived without you." A faint smile touched her lips, and for the first time the divide of laird and servant seemed unimportant. What mattered was trust, courage, and the bond they had forged in fire and shadow. They began to rebuild the castle, warding it with magic and care, restoring not just its walls but its spirit. The servants moved with newfound confidence, sensing the shift, the hope that now filled the halls. Yet Eden never forgot Alowan. He kept the pendant around his neck, a reminder that love could endure even after loss and that sorrow could teach as much as joy. Mara and he worked side by side, their partnership growing stronger, and slowly Eden allowed himself to feel something more, a quiet, deep affection that did not replace the past, but honored it while embracing the present. The legacy of courage. Weeks passed, and the castle, once filled with shadows, now hummed with life. Mara taught the younger servants the old ways, the rituals, and the songs of protection, ensuring that the castle would remain strong against any darkness. Eden patrolled the lands, no longer burdened by fear, but guided by wisdom and the steady flame of hope that Mara had nurtured in him. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the cliffs, Mara and Eden stood on the balcony, looking out over the rolling highlands. The wind carried the scent of herbs and rain, of salt and stone. "We did not just survive," Eden said, voice low, thoughtful. "We changed the fate of this place, and perhaps even our own." Mara nodded, her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. "Yes. The past has shaped us, but it does not control us. We are free to choose what comes next." He turned to her, feeling a quiet courage swell within him. "Mara, will you stand with me not as a servant but as my equal?" Her lips curved into a smile, soft but certain. "Yes, Eden." "I will." The wind blew, carrying with it the faint echo of Alowan's blessing. The castle had endured storms, shadows, and sorrow, yet now it thrived. And for the first time in generations, the Laird and his partner could face the future with hearts unburdened, guided by love, trust, and courage. Final resolution: the curse that had haunted Dunraith for centuries was lifted. The spirits, once restless and vengeful, now moved on, leaving only memories and lessons behind. The castle, once a place of sorrow, now glowed with life, laughter, and hope. Eden and Mara, bound by trials, courage, and love, walked through the halls together. The past was remembered but no longer chained them. They were free, not just to rule the castle but to build a life together, one of choice, trust, and shared strength. And though the highlands could still be stormy and the winds might carry whispers of the past, the Laird and his partner stood ready, hearts intertwined, knowing that courage, love, and wisdom could triumph over any shadow. Cliffhanger for future tales optional. As night fell over the castle, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying a voice older than Dunraith itself. "The bloodline is free, but the world beyond waits, and other trials remain." Eden tightened Mara's hand in his. Whatever came next, they would face it together.